Hey everyone, Ekman here with another video, and today we have a top 9 breakdown for the TCG Con Digimon Tournament that happened in person in Texas this past weekend. It was 68 players with 6 rounds of Swiss to a top 8 cut, which they did play out there to get to this top 8 that we see here today. So real quick before we get started, first big shoutouts to Primitive for not only providing the list to me to make this video, but he also recorded some of the matches for this tournament, so make sure to check out their YouTube. Obviously, a lot of good gameplay content on Primitive's channel, and I could not make this without them, so big shoutouts to them. And also, if it's not obvious, I am not at home right now. I'm on vacation traveling, so this did take a good chunk of effort to just put it together, compile, and everything else. So if you guys do appreciate these videos, please consider hitting that like and subscribe button. It means a lot to me. So anyways, going into this top 8 breakdown, we do have 3 WarGreymon X, which, real quick, Midwest meta is just completely different than like East Coast, West Coast. There's always something different going on based on it, and this is kind of just going over like the Collecticon tournament that happens in September as well. Just decks were just weird. Ratios are not what we're normally seeing, and I just have to say, it's just people in the Midwest play different. I'm from the Midwest. I grew up there for a majority of my life, and people just play what they want, and sometimes they do really, really well with it. So again, 3 WarGreymon X here, a yellow hybrid of all things, a Gabubond, 1 MetalGaruru X, which is crazy, a security control, and a blue flare as well. So a lot of different archetypes. I mean, we're late into this BT10 EX3 format. This is probably the last big tournament that we have before we're going into the next month, which also is the Nationals format too. So this is obviously a last hurrah in a lot of ways, but yeah, a lot of interesting decks that a lot of them do get some kind of buff, or a good amount of them get some buffs and some stuff to look into that next format too. So we're just going to go over the top placing list in each archetype, starting off with the first place, Eric Ortiz's WarGreymon X. Starting off, we have Eric Ortiz's top 8 WarGreymon X, and we had 3 WarGreymons in the top 4, so pretty silly to see that in a deck that honestly hasn't been getting a lot of tops, a lot of coverage in these past meta, which this meta has been pretty long. This has been like a 3-month meta that we've had. To see just the whole top 3 being exactly this whole archetype was really, really interesting. So obviously it got a little bit of support in this, and it's WarGreymon or Greymon, whatever you want to say. They're getting a good amount of support in BT10 as well, or BT11, sorry, as well. A little bit of like the offshoot of what we're getting for like the Black WarGreymon X, but since a lot of the at least bottom line of this is the same, there's a lot of potential for this deck too to kind of get a lot of that additional support as well. So the idea of this deck, if you guys don't know, is it's kind of like a big glass cannon in a way, but it's not as, I'd say, glassy as the other ones, just because you do have a lot of protection and a lot of way to kind of confirm that you do get through the security. Namely, we do run the WarGreymon X, which is, instead of being protection from battle like for the MetalGaruru X, it protects you from effects, removing or deleting or returning it to hand or deck. So chaos degradation still procs, but that kind of protection is quite good, especially since the whole line is a little bit better than most, getting a larger amount of DP on your guys. We also do have the MetalGaruru X, so gains security attack +1 for the turn. Then this gains +3k if you have MetalGaruru or X antibody underneath it, so it becomes an 11k by itself, which also means that a WarGreymon from BT1 becomes a 14k just with this, and this becomes a 15k. But you also are going to get boosts from this Agumon promo. You can get boosts from the BT5 Greymon, and just everything else. And this version ran only the draw Coromons, but I've seen a lot just kind of flip between that, or the other one just gives the +1k DP as well. So really strong kind of deck here, and again, if it gets damage in, it's really great. And just the fact that this WarGreymon does prevent you from getting around security attack effects is really great too. So it's I don't know, it's a strong card. We keep seeing it whenever security control is really popular, and I think the Midwest really does like running security control as well. So, and then lastly, OmniX, so a newer tech. This deck is kind of a BT9 deck, but it's still a really, really good way to kind of finish the game in a lot of ways. So here's the deck. Congrats to Eric for their first place finish there. And then jumping all the way down to top 8 to 4th place, this is Anthony Howell's Yellow Hybrid, which another deck that we haven't been seeing a whole lot of play. Obviously in BT9 it did get the restriction of Jet Sophimon to only 1. We also have Sunrise Buster getting limited to 1 as well, but this deck is still apparently very, very very good here. So obviously the idea for this is to kind of just chip away at damage and be really kind of like, it's like in between like a secured and control, and I don't almost want to say Ricky Rush, but that seems kind of wrong to say. But just the idea that you're able to set up a lot of tamers. There's still not a lot of tamer destruction right now. At least people aren't targeting as much as they probably will be in BT11. So that's something that you'd have to be a little bit wary running this deck, I think, in the next format, because Black WarGreymon X is just going to destroy all your tamers. But right now, it's not on a lot of people's radars, being really good for setting up these tamers and then just doing chip damage with your level 4 Quasimons and Zephyrmons. But also, this deck was kind of wild too. It ran the Aandroidd, Rapidmon, and the Shakuamon as well. So Aandroidd being able to, whenever it Digivolve, no matter what it is, it's pretty much going to be just Shakuamon anyways, but you get to recover 1 if you have 3 or less security, which is quite nice. And then also inherit effect when attacking, if you have 3 or more security cards, return one of your opponent's level 3s to their hand. This also just means like you can have in raising an Aandroidd, and then if it's your turn, you can Digivolve into like a Zephyrmon on top of a Tamer for 2. You can DNA into a Shakuamon and then Digivolve into a Dynasmon. So something that I think this is nice is that it's kind of, it takes more setup, but it kind of fixes the issue with not having Jet Sylphimon anymore, at least at 4, where this does get the recovery. It does get the cheaper devolution to a level 5, which means you can get into the level 6 from having just a level 4 and raising and a level, and a tamer out, which is quite nice. So I like that. I like this deck a lot. It's kind of like, I'm happy it's not super meta anymore, but I do like the idea of this deck. Sometimes this deck just feels invincible, which is really good and probably why it needed to get adjusted, but it's cool to see it still trucking and still doing quite well. So congrats again to Anthony for their finish there. And next up we have Jesse Smith's top 8 Gabubond. And like, just these last 3 decks, they're all just like decks that, like, I would say no one would say was tier 1. I'd say that a lot of people would say they've been strong. They've been obviously strong previously, and they, I guess, are still good right now, right? It was a sizable tournament in a lot of regards, and just being able to see a deck like this be good is very strong. So I did talk to Primitive too. So he said that him and Jesse put this together like 1 a.m. the day of the event, but there's a lot of, I know Primitive really likes Gabubond in a lot of ways, so and I'm pretty sure Jesse does as well. So not like they didn't just have these cards on them anyways, but it's really just interesting to see that, again, this deck just doing very well. So some cards to just consider here is that it runs both the ancient Garurumon package and also the Gabubond package. Neither of them at 4, which is quite interesting. Most of the decks, at least back in the day, would max out at these, but I think the idea is like, they're both like heavy hitting dudes. You don't want to see them all the time. You want to kind of be careful about that. But running 12 Agumons, having not a lot of these hybrids here. We have a Lobomon, a Kendogurumon, and then 4 Kumamons. You also do have 3 other Lobomons as well, which you have to do in raising to get the effect into Ancient Garurumon too, but that's fine. And also the Beowulfmon if you need to go up the chain. So it's really more of like a blue hybrid Gabubond mix, which obviously was something that happened when Blue Hybrid was the best deck in the game, but interesting. And then lastly, running the red package as well, so it's a Pepsi version. So Lightning Gels being able to get, if you have less cards than your opponents, you get to get Security Attack +1, and since both these guys have essentially, they can attack more than once, that can really stack up very quickly too. So obviously Tai is great for that too, and then the Matt and Sora, you just draw so much cards in this deck that it's not very difficult to get this condition either. So congrats again to Jesse for this deck. I'm happy that it did well. Again, very, very weird, like, top couple decks in the sense that none of them have really been doing a lot in this meta, and they just kind of show up and do a good job here. So next up we have our top 8. This is Juan as MetalGaruru X. And now this is the meta we'd expect. This is the deck that we'd probably expect to be in this top 8. But the fact that only one of them was quite surprising to me. I think this is like the worst performance that MetalGaruru X has done all year, which is quite surprising to me. But yeah, it's in a really cool spot that this deck is maybe on its way out. I know a lot of people saying in BT11 that like Black WarGreymon X just destroys it, and we'll have to see if that's actually true in a lot of ways. But this deck, I think, is pretty standard for what I'm seeing. The differences that I recall just from jumping this in, as much as that 2 Kikaida's Breath is quite a lot. That's a little bit more than average, I would say. 1 or 0 is normally what I see. Only 1 Blue Memboost, which is quite small, and then also only 1 Davis, which what you have 12 rookies, and then you only have like 3 additional searches for this. So this is definitely a very aggressive ratio of cards here. 5 level 6s too, which is a little bit on this high end, and then also one of the Sagittarius modes as well, which isn't always seen in these builds either. But again, just congrats to Juan. I don't have a lot to say about this archetype. We'll see if it does anything in BT 11, but again, congrats to Juan there. Next, we have Hunter Smothers' top 8 security control list, and this is additionally something that is pretty standard for security control. I think yellow-purple has almost always been the more successful variant of it, at least in this BT10 meta. Some choice cards for this, like the level 5's Magna and one Aandroidd, both of them can digivolve into the Venusmon, are the Securiamon, though this normally doesn't really mind being played for the hard play cost too. Lonky, I think, has been more and more popular as time goes on. It's just a really good security bomb for us. And then just a lot of just purple good cards. Fly Bullet at 3, Flame Hellscythe, Chaos Degradation, Matashita, Mimi, and Kari are both just really obnoxious tamers to get out. Like, sometimes they just kind of lock your opponent out from doing more than like 1 or 2 things a turn either. So it's just very obnoxious. You guys have your own opinions about security control right now. It's gonna be really interesting to see what it does in the next set because there is a lot more burn damage stuff, but also, like, I think Grandis, I think a lot of people are expecting to be a strong deck going into the to the finals there. And this is the deck that can just win against that deck, no problem at all. If they just hit a Fly Bullet in security, they probably just lose on the spot. So I don't know. It's always been like the weirdest like anti-meta deck in the format whenever it's really prevalent. And it's really hard to predict how well security control will kind of ever do. So anyways, congrats to Hunter on their top 8 finish there. We'll have to see how security control does in this next month. I also did want to mention Michael's list. So Michael gave me these lists, and he got 9th. He got that super bubble. So I did want to cover his security control list too, especially because it did have a little bit of spice text that I did like primarily. It did have the Magnamon as well, so it is a blocker, but it also has Armor Purge too, which means that if you're worried about like piercing damage, this Armor Purges, which means they don't get that piercing, which is interesting. And the fact that it's a blocker and everything that goes with it. And chances are it's going to, Armor Purge into a Salamon, which means that if it dies, you get the recovery too. It has like the Kaiser Leomon, a 1-of, which is interesting. Alfani Fall, like you could do like one chain of like this doing purple yellow, and you also have the Maycrack Vicious mode. Like this is, I guess, the one that you really need. Just the fact that you're able to use this to go into this, and you get the de-digivolution or the deletion, and the recovery is kind of nice there too. 3 Death X mods because the man is crazy, and then usually the usual suspects from yellow and purple there: the Holy Wave, the Wyvern's Breath instead of the Lonky, Fly Bullet, Calling from Darkness, the Swartz. And then just kind of everything else. Also, just the 1-of Cody, which can come up, especially since it just has to have a Digimon with 2 or more colors attack, so you can have even Death Xmon trigger that, Ophanimon triggers that, heck, even Magnamon triggers that too, which is really interesting as well. So I like this whole kind of archetype here. I like his choices. I think they're very creative and they're very unique, and just a shame that was the bubble out pro. So congrats to Michael again for the finish, and again for the decks. Make sure to check out his YouTube channel for some matches from the tournament. And to wrap it on up, we do have Robyn Fincher's top 8 Blue Flare, and this is honestly one of the most annoying archetypes in the format right now. Maybe I wouldn't say it's like one of the best, but like when it goes off, like sometimes you feel very helpless against it, and it's definitely a deck that you have to play their game, because if you don't play around what they can do, which is essentially if you have an archetype that you have to have 2 or more Digimon out, so for example like Mastamon has a hard time against this sometimes, with all the stun and all the advantage it gets from having 2 or more on your opponent's side, you just can have a really hard time. It has a lot of weird polarizing matches because of that effect. So, and this list too is a lot, I'd say, like greedier and a little bit different than I've normally seen too. It's just kind of on the low end. It has like it's only running 7 rookies. It has like the whole chains at max, so it has 4 MetalGaruru, even 4 of the DDRKirby, which is not usually what I see. I think that's an interesting check choice there. It's also running the Plasma Decadrill launcher. So card effect: when you use this effect, your opponent has 2 or more Digimon in play, reduce the memory cost by 2, and main return one of your opponent's level 6 or higher to their hand. And the security effect is just return anything. So it's a really good like bomb card. I think this deck traditionally doesn't have a lot of good cards in security, besides Tamers, which does have quite a few, but being able to have a way to beat Grandis just by returning it to their hand halfway through their swing, I think can win you the game too. So I think in this format specifically, it's a good call for those decks, and it can be very strong there. And then like Blazing Mem Boost, the Christopher or Kariha at 4, and then the Sora and Joe, which can be, again, this can be really obnoxious as well, getting a lot of memory and getting the help that you need for that. So I don't know, this just seems like a little bit more of a low to the ground. It was also just the 4 Kori Kakumons as well, which you can digivolve on top of itself and do the effect. I would say, like, try to find room for 1 Tommy. If you're running 4 Kori Kakus as it is, it's probably worth it. That's like the only thing I would change for this. I'd probably try to find room for 1 of them. But again, it's a very obnoxious deck. It does get support in BT11. We'll have to see if it does anything better than that. I think it's always been in the shadow of MetalGaruru X in a lot of ways, but it's an archetype that I believe in personally, and I think it can do some work. It's just you do have to put some work in it, and sometimes your opponent doesn't have to necessarily know what your deck does, which is, I think, pretty common there. So anyways, that is the end of the top 9 coverage that we have here for us today. So again, thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to check out Prim's channel for some gameplay, and that's going to be it for me. So again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you all next time.
Damn it. Damn it.